Are you ready for the word?
Yes, sir.
Turn to Genesis 13 again, please. And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had. And Lot with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. Very rich, we could say exceedingly wealthy, we could say loaded. In today's terminology, we would call him a multimillionaire, perhaps even a billionaire. He was exceedingly wealthy in cattle, in silver, and in gold. We must not allow the way we've been programmed through the years to cause us to not see what the verse says. Abram was very rich. And if you read on, you find out that Lot also was very rich. And you find out that Isaac inherited his dad's wealth and built upon it. Isaac was very rich. And Jacob, even though he was pursued by his brother, and even though he was mistreated by his father-in-law and his brother-in-laws who tried to keep him down in poverty, Jacob also rose out of that and became a very wealthy man. Joseph was sold into slavery. We talked about him last week. Yet we're told on the day that he was bought by Potiphar that Yahweh prospered him. He was a prosperous man, meaning Yahweh was pushing him forward. Some wonder how much longer I'm going to talk about prosperity and financial gain, and wonder when I'll get back to teaching on Torah. Well, the fact is, prosperity and financial gain are prominent in Torah principles. You can't teach Torah without teaching about financial gain and prosperity. When we teach prosperity, we're teaching Torah. Right. If someone's teaching you that you shouldn't prosper or that you shouldn't set high financial goals for yourself, they're teaching you the doctrines of men. Those concepts do not come out of the Scripture. They come from the commandments and the doctrines of men. So this morning I'm going to continue talking about how we deliver ourselves from lack, want, debt, distress, sickness, and disease. Those things are evil. And we're taught to pray to be delivered from those things so that those things might not grieve us. So if you get delivered from lack, what do you have? Plenty. Yahweh, deliver me from evil. Deliver me from lack. That means I have an abundance. Deliver me from want. The opposite of want is what? I've got it. I've plenty. Overflow. Deliver me from debt. If I'm delivered from debt, what I have? Bunch of money. Liquid assets. Cash flow. Deliver me from distress. If I'm delivered from distress, what do I have?
Peace.
Joy. Peace. Fulfillment. Deliver me from sickness. What do I have? Health. Deliver me from disease. What do I have? Health. Soundness. Immunity. So when we ask Yahweh to deliver us from evil, we're asking Him to put us in a position of abundance and overflow and liquid assets, and to have joy and peace and health and soundness and immunity. We should start every day by saying, deliver me from evil that it might not grieve me. Why wouldn't we? If we believe, and if Yeshua taught us to pray this way, why wouldn't we open our eyes with excitement every day and begin the day by saying, lead me not into tests and trials, but deliver me from evil. Deliver me from lack and want and debt and distress, sickness and disease. Vance Havner was a Methodist preacher back in the 70s who wrote a lot of books. And I can't tell you which book I read it out of, but I do remember reading in one of his books. He said it is a sad thing to see an eagle who is meant to ride the air currents and to soar above the clouds, who is meant to live on the highest peaks of the highest mountains, he said, it is sad to see such a creature beating his wings against a cage where he is being held in captivity. But then he wrote, sadder still is to see that eagle that was meant to ride above the clouds no longer beating his wings against the cage. If we're not waking up every day with a hunger to rise above where we are, if we're not waking up every day believing that Yahweh can and will lift us out of our situations, if we're not waking up every day praying these words, deliver me from evil that it might not grieve me, if we're not waking up every day praying, bless me indeed, enlarge my coast, let your hand be with me, if we're not praying that every day, we've stopped beating our wings against the cage and we have resigned ourselves to live and surrender to a captivity that we've never meant to live in. So this study is for those who no longer want to be in a cage. If someone likes the security and the accommodations of the cage they're living in, and they're comfortable with those, this study's not for them. It's for those who no longer want to be caged. Now last week I told you I saw a parallel between my weight loss journey and the journey that we can take to prosperity. That I believe that the same steps that I use and the same principles that I use to lose weight, I can also use to lose lack, want, debt, distress, sickness, and disease. Now to summarize last week, and I do mean summarize, I no longer recap. Y'all broke me of recapping sermons, but to summarize last week, I shared with you that 5 years ago I weighed in excess of 289 pounds. 289 pounds is where I stopped weighing myself. And again, I printed off and posted some pictures because it's easy for me to forget how big I had gotten. But I had gotten to be a big old boy. At 58 years old, I decided I had to change. And in order to change, I had to change. That change began with a decision. I had to decide that I could and that I would. I had, prior to that decision, felt hopeless. Hopeless is a horrible condition to be in. But what hopelessness means is that you're believing lies. And I had begun to believe lies. I began to believe I was too busy. I began to believe I was too old. I began to believe it would be too hard. I was believing those lies. I was neither too old, too busy, neither would it be too hard. My situation, though I felt it was hopeless, I discovered it was not hopeless. So what I had to do was hope against hope that I could change. And when I changed the way I thought, I began to see some hope. And the more hope I saw, the more change I made, and the more change I made, the more hope I could see. I realized that if I was going to change my condition, I was the only one who could do it. No one else could do it for me. The parallels between this and prosperity cannot be denied. They shouldn't be overlooked. If our prospect of prospering looks hopeless, it's simply because we're not moving toward it. If we will decide that it can change and will change and start looking for that change, we'll find a hope of change. There'll be something that'll give us a glimmer of hope. Hey, I can change my financial situation. And the more hope we have, the more change we will make, and the more changes that we make, the more hope we create, and the more hope we create, the greater the changes become. As I said, though, it was not somebody else that had put me in that situation. McDonald's did not make me overweight. I did. And we need to understand that where we work is not holding us down. If we're being held down, it's we that's holding us down, and the only one that can change it is we. So the first thing I had to do to change was to decide to change. And that did not mean, I'm going to repeat this, that did not mean to go on some fad diet and exercise plan. And let me tell you why that won't work. No diet, no exercise plan is going to have any lasting impact if you don't change you. I had to change me in order for something to work. A fad diet actually, though it might work short term, if you don't change you, it will result in you being in worse condition after it than you were before you started it. I had to change me. And I had to make 3 important changes, and I told you those last week. I had to change the way I think, change the way I talk, change the way I acted. If we don't change how we think, we cannot change the way we are. Out of the heart flows the issues of life. The issues of life come out of the heart. So I have to change the way I think. I had to change the way I talk. If we don't change how we talk, we cannot change the way we are. For life and death are in the power of the tongue, and we set the course of our life by the words that are coming out of our mouth. If we don't change the way we act, we cannot change the way we are. For it is not the hearer of the word or the hearer of instruction who gets blessed. It's the doer of the word. So getting instruction and hearing things and writing them in a notebook's not enough if we don't act on them. We've got to do something if we're going to see change. At 58, I was in the condition I was in because of the way I thought, because of the way I talked, and because of the things I was doing. So I had to change all 3 of those things. I had to begin to think I can lose weight. I can regain my health. I can be fit. It's not too late. I'm not too old. I had to change the way I was thinking, which meant I had to change the way I talked. My body, I was no longer saying my goal is to weigh 300 pounds. I quit saying that. I started saying my body is a fat burning machine. It burns fat. It builds muscle. I started saying things like that. I'm strong. I'm fit. I'm well able to do this. I had to eat differently. And I shared with you last week that even small changes made a difference. I didn't make drastic changes. I just made small changes. And when I saw the progress, I made more changes. I had to become more active on purpose. I had to walk. Eventually, to see the changes I wanted, I had to join a gym. Those small changes in the beginning brought small changes in the beginning, which encouraged me to make greater changes later, which brought greater changes later. Today I'm going to list for you several other things I did. I'll go through this list far more quickly than I did last week. And again, remind you that I believe these steps I took can be applied to losing weight or losing lack, want, debt, distress, sickness, or disease. And this journey required several things. The primary thing it required of me was that I become a student dedicated to learning. Become a student dedicated to learning. How can we expect to change anything about us if we stay in our present condition of knowledge? You see, I didn't know anything about nutrition or food. We've been conditioned all of our life just to eat whatever we can buy. Most of us have never had a nutrition class. Most of us were never taught the value of different kinds of nutrition. Most of us were never taught the benefits of this over the benefits of that. So how can we expect to change anything about us if we stay in our present condition of knowledge? It's impossible to change if we don't pursue knowledge. I had to learn new terminology, and I had to learn new skills. The new terminology and the new skills pushed me forward. So let's talk about some of the skills I learned. Skill number 1 was I learned how to read a label. Do you like ketchup? Anybody here don't like ketchup? You don't like ketchup. You like ketchup? You ever read the label on ketchup? 1 tablespoon of ketchup has 4 grams of sugar. Most of us would never use 1 tablespoon. We turn the bottle upside down and go and squirt a bunch of it out on the plate. So 3, 4, 5 tablespoons of ketchup, you're looking at 16, 20, 24 grams of sugar. That's 4, 5, 6 teaspoons of sugar. It's great that they put 4 grams instead of telling you a teaspoon, because we think 4 grams, it can't be much. But what they're actually telling you is it's almost a teaspoon of sugar in every tablespoon of ketchup. No wonder it tastes good, right? Now, I'm not saying don't eat ketchup. What I'm saying is we got to learn to read the label. Because what happens is we think because we quit eating so many Snicker bars or so many bags of M&Ms a day, we think we eliminated sugar out of our life, but we really didn't. Sugar is hidden in so many things we like. That's the reason the things we like taste so good, is they're hiding sugar in it. I never thought ketchup was loaded with sugar, but it's loaded with sugar. So I had to learn what was in the food I was eating. And once I learned what was in the food I was eating, I thought to myself, no wonder I'm in the shape that I'm in. I was eating without examining or caring about what I was eating. So one skill was I began to look at, I'll pick what I'm about to eat up and I'll look at what the label says about it. Number 2, I had to learn how to cook. I determined early on that I could not expect Marie or anybody else to be responsible for what I was putting in my body. Up until I started this journey, I only used the stove rarely to cook an egg or maybe a hamburger. Well, my cooking skills are still not great, but they're far more developed than they were. I can get up at 3:25 in the morning, get myself dressed and ready for the gym, my clothes ready for work, walk into the kitchen around 3:55 every morning, and by 4:30, walk out the door with 4 or 5 meals that I have prepared for me for that day. I get them ready to go. I'm not saying that everybody has to do that. What I'm talking about is, for me to get to where I wanted to go eventually, I had to start prepping meals. I had set a goal. Continuing to eat the same things I ate in fast food restaurants or just restaurants was not getting me where I wanted to go. So I had to learn a new skill, and that was meal prepping. It required me to measure food. It required me to package food, and this was a trial and error adventure. I'm in my truck most of the time on most days. I'm not near a microwave. When most people meal prep, they put it in a Tupperware container of some kind, and at the office they warm it up. I didn't have that option. And so I had some trial and error adventures. One of them was this one. I went and bought me a one-eye cooktop thing, electric. And then I bought me a power inverter, converter, whatever you call that thing. And I'd hook it to the battery of my truck, and I'd stop and I'd get out and cook. I've cooked at Sam and Pepper and Will and Eva's ball games. Just pull up there at the ballpark, pop the hood, and start cooking my meals. Well, it didn't take long for me to realize that that was not going to be a lasting practice that I could continue with. Not only did you get strange looks, but it just wasn't very efficient. The next thing I did is went to buying cheap thermoses, and thought, you can't Thermoses aren't just for liquids. You can put solids in there too. But I bought cheap thermoses. And they'd keep food hot for about an hour and a half, and then the rest of the day was horrible. Eventually, I invested in some good thermoses that will keep my food warm for 7, 8, 9 hours. And so now, when I get up in the morning, I prep my meals, I put them in the thermoses, I load them in a lunchbox, and I take them with me. And I have learned to love what I eat because I know exactly what I'm eating. I don't just eat chicken, I eat 8 ounces of chicken. I don't just eat fish, I eat 8 ounces of fish. I don't just eat hamburger meat, I eat 8 ounces of hamburger meat. I measure it out. I can't measure my progress without knowing exactly what I'm putting in my body every day. So I had to learn new skills. And if you can't see the parallel, I don't know how to explain it any better, because in order to lose lack, want, debt, distress, sickness, or disease, we're going to have to learn new skills and try different things. We can't keep doing what we're doing the way we're doing it and expect it to change. They've said that is the very definition of insanity, right? To keep doing the same thing and expect different results. We're going to have to learn new skills. And some of the things we try may work. Some of them may not. But we're never going to know till we try. Right. Another skill I learned was how to wash dishes. Why'd you smile at that, Eva? At first I was prepping my meals and then leaving the kitchen in a mess every day. Conviction of how my new disciplines were inconveniencing others caused me to start cleaning up after myself. So I wash what I use. I may not always get it back where it's supposed to go. That's a skill I've still got to develop, but I at least get it clean and put it out of the way. How can we expect to prosper if we don't care about how what we're doing affects others? If all you care about is how it's going to impact you, Yahweh cannot and will not push you forward. He can and will push you forward if you're serving others in your journey. Another skill I learned was understanding the makeup of food. Not just how to avoid sugars or bad fats, but I also learned about micronutrients, how important they are, and macronutrients, and how important there are. There are 3 macros, nutrients, in every food. Do y'all know what macros are? I didn't, had to learn it. You know what I'm talking about when I talk about the macros of food?
Protein, fat.
Protein, fat, carbohydrates. So foods are made up of those 3 macros. They've got protein, they got carbohydrates, and they got fats. Some have more protein, less carbs, less fat. Some have more carbohydrates and less protein. And so you got to know what you're putting in your body. In order to reach the goals I set for myself, I needed to control those macros. I needed to make sure I understood what foods had what amounts of each. I came to understand that every gram of protein has 4 calories. Every gram of carbohydrate has 4 calories. But every gram of fat has 9 calories. So they add up real quick. They taste good. Fats are what gives food flavor. But man, they're loaded with calories. So I learned that in order to promote muscle growth, I needed to consume somewhere around 1 gram of protein for every pound of body weight, at least that I wanted to weigh. So my goal was to weigh 250 and I wanted to increase muscle. I needed to be consuming 250 grams of protein a day. Well, you can't eat a lot of sandwiches and do that because you're going to load up on carbohydrates and you're going to load up on fat. You're going to have to eat lean sources of protein like fish and chicken, lean cuts of beef. So 250 grams of protein, you have to learn how to convert that into ounces and so on and so forth. But you learn that 250 grams of protein a day is going to end up being 1,000 calories a day. So now if I'm setting my calorie intake at 2,000 or 2,500 and I know I've got to have 1,000 calories of protein, Now I've got either 1,000 or 1,500 calories to play with, and now I will adjust my carbs and my fat. And so it was a skill that I had to learn, and I had to tinker with and figure out which percentages work best for me. 30% fat, 40% carbs, or 35% carbs and 25% fats. I had to learn how those things work. I know that's kind of boring and probably irritating for me to even talk about, but here's the point. I had to adjust and readjust numbers to find out what works for me. And the same is true when we're talking about business or finances. There are patterns, there are principles, there are rules, there are practices that many have used to succeed. We have to learn those principles and practices, and we have to use them, and then we have to adjust them to what works best for us. Another skill I learned was proper training. There's a lot of difference between going into a gym and moving weights around and going into a gym and actually engaging your muscles. You can use momentum and a lot of other things to move weight without really engaging that muscle in the optimum way. So I had to learn techniques inside the gym. You can do what I call, Will's heard me say this many times, you can do what I call pop the weight, where you go up and pop it, and pop it, and pop it, or pop it this way, just pop. And you can move a lot of weight that way and look impressive doing that, but you're not getting the best result from doing it. The best result comes from flexing that muscle on the way up, flexing and letting it back down slow. Up, flexing, down slow. And you can't do near as much weight near as many times. Not near as impressive, but it causes growth. So those are things I had to learn. I had to learn about hypertrophy, eccentric versus concentric. I had to learn about mesocycles, progressive overload, reps and reserve. How did I learn all of that? By reading, by listening, by going to YouTube. It was a wealth of knowledge. You find people who have done it, it worked for them, and they can share with you information that helps you so you're not wasting your time inside the gym. Write this down. You ready? I am one skill away from doubling my income. I am one skill away from doubling my income. You put anything there you wanted to. I am one skill away from reaching my ideal weight. Then write this down. All skills are learnable. You see, there's nothing you need to know how to do that you can't learn how to do. Just because we don't know how to do it right now doesn't mean we can't learn how to do it. So what new skill are you working on? When's the last time you worked on one? We cannot move forward with the skills we presently have. The skills we presently have got us to where we are. To go beyond where we are, we need new skills. I went from 289 pounds to 245 pounds, 245, 248. And I felt good about what I had accomplished, and it felt good. But I stalled at that weight for a little over 3 years. And the reason I stalled there was because I kept thinking that the skills and disciplines that got me to 245 would get me below 245. But I was wrong. to break that barrier would require me to learn new skills and adopt new disciplines. There was one other thing that hindered it, and we'll talk about that later, but I got down to 245 and I stayed there. It was a steady decline down to that. But then I got there and I got stuck and it wouldn't move. And I kept trying to use the same skills and the same disciplines to get me below it, and they wouldn't work. June 1st of this year, I weighed 243 pounds. Yesterday, I weighed 223 pounds. So in less than 3 months, I lost 20 pounds. I broke that barrier, and I have steadily and more rapidly than before come below it. It required new skills and new disciplines. My goal is to get to 215. I will get there. I'm only 8 pounds away, closest I've been. I haven't weighed 233 pounds in over 3 decades. I will get there, but it required new skills and new disciplines. I'm not saying that I'll get to 215 and maintain that weight. I'm saying that my goal is to weigh 215, if only for one day. That's my goal. And I'm determined to learn whatever skill I've got to learn and execute that skill and adopt whatever discipline I've got to adopt to get there. It's a goal, so I'm going to get there. But it takes new skills and new disciplines. Again, this can be applied to spiritual concepts, to physical concepts, to financial concepts. It doesn't matter what you apply it to. The point is that to go from where we are to where we want to be, what new skill do we need to learn to move us forward, financially, spiritually, or physically? There's a wealth of information out there. We just have to be willing to become students who will hear and do. A couple of weeks ago, we was up at Spencer and Stephanie's house, and Maria Church was, after the service, was sharing. We were talking about this, changing the way we think and the way we talk and the way we act. And Maria Church said that she had been working in a bank and she was miserable. This was years ago, but she had worked in a bank and she was miserable working in there. And then she realized the only person that could change that was her. And the only way to change it was to learn a new skill. And so she set out in the evenings to teach herself new skills, plural. And the skills she taught herself was how every game inside a casino works. How every one of them work. Not just one, but all of them. She set out to become a student of casino skills. And once she had learned them, she applied. When she applied, they hired her. When they hired her, she quickly became one of the most valued employees they had. Because most people they hired, they trained them with one skill to do one game. But Maria didn't depend on them to train her how to do that job. She went and learned how to do every job within that place, and they realized that in her was more value because they could use her wherever they needed her. And her income went way up. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. It is realizing if I'm going to change my condition, what new skill have I got to learn? Go learn it and do it. Another skill I learned is that resistance causes growth or resistance causes improvement. We cannot grow, we cannot improve if we do not face resistance. Resistance training is putting your muscles under a load. It is taking weights and making your muscles move those weights repeatedly over a period of time, consistently, week after week. If there is no resistance, a muscle will atrophy. If a muscle is not facing resistance on a consistent basis, it dies. It will atrophy. The old saying, use it or lose it. Here's the point. We cannot expect to change how we look or change our finances without increasing in knowledge, skills, and willingness to do things that are difficult. If we think that we're going to become wealthier than we are right now without having to know more than we know right now, without having to do more than we do right now, without having to face more than we face right now, we've deceived ourselves. It's impossible. It's doing that which is hard that brings growth, and those who on purpose will do that which is hard are the ones who grow. It's hard. Yes, it is. That's the reason we do it. It causes us to grow. Another skill is learning the value of rewards and refuels. You cannot push yourself without rewarding yourself. You have to see incremental improvements and celebrate them. You cannot say, my goal is to lose 50 pounds, or my goal is to make $200,000 a year, and then get frustrated when you've only lost 37 pounds, or when the only thing you did was double your salary. When you see incremental changes and improvements, you got to learn to celebrate those, because it will refuel you to go for the other changes. The Bible says it this way: don't muzzle the ox that treads out the corn. It's cruel to put a muzzle on an ox and make him work all day long treading out corn and never allow him to eat from the fruit of his labor. It's cruel. It's cruel to do the same thing to us. It's great to have disciplines that push us career-wise, financially, or physically. It's great to have disciplines that push us toward those things, but as we accomplish things, sometimes step back and don't stay so single-mindedly on the goal that you can't step back and look at what you've accomplished and say, made some improvements. And celebrate that. Celebrate it with a trip to Rosie's. Celebrate it with an egg sandwich. Celebrate it by going and buying yourself some gadget that you just would make you happy. Don't muzzle the ox that treads out the corn. As you make incremental changes every now and then, that's the reason for these pictures. I would forget what I used to look like. But I can look at the pictures, I can look back in my notebook, I can see what I used to be able to lift, I can see what I used to weigh, and I can see where I'm at today, and I can celebrate. And the celebrations, the rewards I give myself, refuels me for the next part of the journey. Does that make sense? Another skill is never letting failure linger. There are times you're going to fail to stick to the plan. There are times you'll cave in to the temptation of tasty foods and desserts, or not doing what you need to do for work or whatever. I've learned not to allow those failures to linger in my mind or to stay a habit. I see them for what they are, just a temporary setback. Immediately return to the plan. I don't punish myself. I simply brush myself off, get back on the plan. Another skill is the understanding, if somebody else can do it, I can too. You cannot allow self-doubt to hold you back. You cannot allow excuses to hold you captive. In the gym over the last 5 years, I've talked to a lot of people. I've been intrigued by their stories. This one thing I learned is that almost all of them almost all of them had to overcome something. Some of them had to overcome a disease. Some of them had to overcome a disability. Some of them had to overcome fear. Some of them had to overcome injury. Some of them had to overcome bad habits. The only difference between them and those who remained unhealthy is they faced what they had to face and they overcame it. Early on, this was a year or so after starting to the gym, I met a man. I would guess him to be in his 30s, I don't know. But I noticed him for two reasons. Number one, he was strong as a bull. Number two, he only had one leg. And this particular day, I'd never seen him before. He was in the gym. He was sitting on a bench, has a back to it. He was sitting there and he had 85-pound dumbbells that he picked up himself and set them on his knees. And then himself, he would push them up. And then he was sitting there doing reps with 85-pound dumbbells in each hand. That's quite a feat. He was doing them easier than I could do 35-pound dumbbells. I asked him at one point, he was about to do another set. I said, would you like me to hand you those weights? He said, no, sir, thank you very much. But I believe that our strength ought to, what was the word he used? He said, our strength ought to be something we could use out in the field. If I was going to pick up a bale of hay, I wouldn't want you to help me do that either. So if I'm going to lift it, I need to learn how to get it in place. That led to me saying, well, then tell me, how did you lose your leg? I was expecting him to tell me that he was a war veteran and had been injured overseas. I was expecting him to tell me he had had a motorcycle accident or been in a car wreck or something. But instead he told me that while he was in the womb, the umbilical cord wrapped around his leg, cut the circulation off. And when he was born, he had to undergo several surgeries trying to save that leg, and they couldn't, and eventually they cut it off. If that doesn't inspire you to try harder, something's broken. What excuses do we have? It would have been so easy, I think, for this man to wallow in self-pity. But instead, as I talked to him and he shared with me about his childhood and his high school years and his adult years, he just opened up and began to share with me things. I realized that from a very young age, this man was determined to do with one leg what everybody else got to do with two. And he wasn't going to allow the one leg to hold him back. We are without excuse. There is no one who is more successful than we are who did not have to overcome the same things we have to overcome. Self-doubt, fear, anxiety, making time, finding time, overcoming objections, a lack of knowledge, a lack of training, a lack of skills. Everyone more successful than we had to overcome these same obstacles to get to where they are. They weren't born that way. They overcame obstacles to get there. Every successful businessman is not smarter than you are. Some of them are not even as smart. Come on. All of us have worked for somebody that we knew were dumber than we are. It's the truth, right? But they were smarter in this area They were willing to learn a skill to overcome whatever they had to overcome on the inside of them to get to where they wanted to be. And now we can sit there all we want and say, well, he's dumber than I am, and yet he's the one writing my payday. Right? He's the one who writes my check. The point not being to criticize who's above us, the point being to realize that those who may be more successful than we are had to overcome the same stuff we're going to have to overcome if we're going to get there too. All right? Another thing I did was I tracked progress. If you're not tracking your progress, I touched on this a little bit last week. If you're not tracking your progress, either you do not have a well-defined goal in front of you, or you have no desire to progress, and you've quit beating your wings against the cage. You've resigned yourself to live in captivity, to lack, want, debt, distress, sickness, and disease. Another thing I learned, or another thing I did, I learned to value rest. You cannot be healthy without sleeping. I told you last week I started with small changes, but soon I had to make bigger changes that were going to require more of me and more time from me. So I had to make the changes I was seeking a priority, which meant I had to figure out how to fit them into my already busy life. For me, that meant that I was going to have to start getting up at 4. Now it's 3:25, but at that time I had to determine I was going to get up at 4, because for me, I knew that if I waited till at the end of the day, that I would get sidetracked, that there were too many opportunities to not do what I needed to do because other things would be calling for me. And so I had to decide I'm going to do it early in the morning. So I get up early. That means if I'm going to get up early, I had to develop the habit of going to bed, because you cannot be healthy and not sleep. You cannot stay up to 10 or 11 o'clock at night and get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It won't work. That means that there was no more Netflix binging. Right? At 7:30, I'm getting ready for bed. I try to be in the bed between 7:30 and 8. At 9, I'll be blunt and tell you, I cannot continue. I've said it at the dining room table when my children are around. I said it last night to Brian and Krista and Marie. We was having a very awesome conversation. Not last night, night before. But at 9 o'clock I said, I'd be glad. I love this conversation. It is awesome, and I'd be glad to continue it at 3:30 in the morning. But right now I'm going to bed, right? Because that is the boundaries I've had to set for myself. Because rest is just as important as the other things that I'm doing for my health. My commitment to rest is vital to me reaching my goals. So sleep is one area where I rest, and the Sabbath is holy. If you think you can increase your wealth or health by ignoring the Sabbath, you're deceiving yourself. If you think you can increase your wealth or your health by ignoring the Sabbath or ignoring your need to sleep, you are deceiving yourself. You cannot. So I've had to rearrange a lot of things. I have an orchard. I have 2 vineyards. I have had a large garden. I have over 2 acres of grass. Besides all of the other chores that come with owning property and owning a house and having family. I had to decide that it was ridiculous for me to be more concerned with how good my garden looks than I cared about me. The garden does not deserve more of my time than my health does. So I've had to make tough choices and tough decisions. So if we want to prosper, we're going to have to look into our priorities. We're going to have to see where our time is being spent. We're going to have to see what adjustments need to be made. And we're going to have to make sure we schedule time for rest. Another thing I learned is the value of willpower. Never let these words come out of your mouth, well, I just don't have the willpower for that. Break that word down and think about what you're saying. Will power. You have a will. That is your power. The power to change our lives resides within our will. If we choose to change, the power to make it happen arrives. The power is in our will. If we think we have no willpower, what we're actually saying is, I will not choose that thing. Because the moment we choose it, the power to make it be comes. Once we choose with our wills to improve, the power to improve is there. Another thing I learned is the value of, how do I say that? A fellow journeyman. A year ago, Will started going to the gym with me. There have been times over the last year where I thought, I'm too tired to go. But knowing that I would get a text from him the next morning at 4 o'clock saying, Jim, question mark. It makes you get up so that you can say, yes, sir, you betcha. Be right there. Being in the gym and being able to celebrate each other's victories. Attaboy. Good job. To watch each other struggle and strain and improve. That is awesome to be able to do with one another. I think that same thing translates over into prosperity. Is as we take this journey of saying, okay, we're not going to stay where we are, we're going to rise above it, being able to talk with one another about it. Hey, here's what I'm doing. What are you doing? Hey, what's working for you? Have you found something that's working? And to encourage and to exhort and to instruct and to help one another along the way, I think is a very powerful thing. Write this down. I'm going to bring it to a close. I've been talking a long time. Write this down. If you don't make time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness. If you don't fight against lack, want, debt, distress, sickness, and disease, they will overtake you. Same concept. If you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. And if you don't fight against lack, want, debt, distress, sickness, and disease, they will overtake you. Write this down. I am 6 months of consistent activity away from changing my life forever. I am 6 months of consistent activity away from changing my life forever. Do something consistently for 6 months. You will become addicted to the progress and the process. The progress gets addictive. Write this down. I must have a well-defined goal if I'm going to reach it, and must not allow myself to get sidetracked. I told you my goal was to weigh 215 pounds. I got stuck at 245 for over 3 years. 2 reasons. First reason was, I mentioned earlier, I kept trying to move beyond it without learning a new skill or developing a new discipline. Second reason was, I got sidetracked. What was my goal? To weigh 215 pounds. But as I moved toward that goal, I found myself getting stronger and stronger. So getting strong became a sidetrack goal. And what happens is you eventually reach a place in weight loss where you no longer can get stronger. There for a while, you're losing weight and getting stronger. But eventually you'll reach a place where as you lose weight, you lose some strength. You're not getting as strong. So when I would feel the loss of strength, I would abandon the goal of weighing 215 and focus back on getting stronger. I would set birthday goals. And for my 63rd birthday, my goal was, and what I ended up doing was, bench pressing 320 pounds for 2 reps. Squatting 325 pounds for 8 reps. Deadlifting 420 pounds a couple of times. Leg pressing 1,050 pounds. I set those goals and I reached them, but by getting sidetracked with those goals, the weight loss went out the window. I got up to 247, 248, but it made me strong. Eating big and getting big. It made me feel proud, but what that actually did was hindered me from reaching my goal in a timely manner. Looking back, I can now see the foolishness of allowing myself to do that. My goal was never to be the strongest guy in the gym. My goal was never to be a power lifter. Most power lifters are built like tree trunks. They can pick his house up. They're strong, but that was not my goal. And yet I got sidetracked by wanting to show them in the gym I could lift what they could lift. 63 years old, I can do that. Forgetting that my goal was to get to 215. And for the first time in my life to have abs. May seem silly to you, ridiculous to you. I mean, I know I've always had them, but I'd like to see them. I'm 63 years old, and I've never seen them. I'm going to see them, and I'm going to take a picture of them. I won't put it up here, but I'm going to take a picture of them. That's my goal. I got sidetracked. Understand? And we could say, boy, that's a good goal. That's a worthy cause to get strong. Well, it is. But it wasn't my goal. We got to know what our goal is and keep pushing toward it and not get sidetracked by other things. We cannot spiritually, financially, or physically reach our desired place if we do not clearly define where it is we want to go. Yesterday on India's Facebook page, you remember what you posted?
Word for word.
Well, she said on her Facebook page, get into the habit of asking yourself, does this support the life I'm trying to create? Get in the habit of asking yourself, does this support the life I'm trying to create? And if the answer is no, what do? Stop doing that. Does bench pressing 365 pounds help me get where I want to be? No, it makes me stronger, but it doesn't help me get where I want to be. I'm going to have to do something different. It's not helping me get the life I'm trying to create. So I'm going to set that aside and focus instead here. What that meant for me is getting off the bench press and getting on the treadmill. I'd rather be at the bench press. I'd rather be at the squat rack than at the treadmill. But guess which one helps me get where I want to go? The treadmill. That's how laser focused we got to become when it comes to prosperity as well. Write this down. Successful people help others become successful. Or I could say it this way. If you're taking advice from someone about wealth who's broke, that's not smart. If you're taking advice from someone about health who's not healthy, it's not smart. You're probably not going to see a lot of improvement if that's where your advice is coming from. Successful people help others become successful. If you want to know the practical things to do to start a business, I'm not the person to ask. I don't know. Now, if you want to ask what the biblical principles are for prosperity, by all means, let's sit down and talk. I've been studying the Bible. I can share with you biblical principles. But when it comes to the day-to-day practical things you need to do to start a business, you need to talk to somebody who's done it successfully. Right? Please don't take advice from your broke friends and your broke family. That ain't going to work. Well, that's stupid. I'd never do that. Why would you take advice from them? Seek out people that it has worked for and who can give you sound advice. When I first started to the gym, there was a trainer who sized me up and put me in a category and decided that she needed to help me. And harassed might not be the best word, but she approached me several times wanting me to sign a contract so she could train me. I told her no every time, and I told her no because, number one, I saw her clients and I knew she was putting me in the same category as them. She viewed me as someone who would be content like they were to pay a trainer though they never changed. I wasn't content to do that. You go back 5 years, go from that point to 5 years later, and every one of those people are in the same condition they were 5 years ago. But they feel good because they pay a trainer. But they're not changing. So, if you're going to hook up with somebody and take advice from somebody and pay for information from somebody, you make sure they can get you where you want to go. And if they can't get you where you want to go, tell them no. No, thank you. I appreciate the offer. Right? In the gym over the last 5 years, there are a plethora of people who have all kinds of advice. You doing squats? Oh, I wouldn't do squats at your age. Squats are bad for your back. Squats will ruin your knees. Squats this. Squats. I don't do squats. Here's what you ought to do instead. I look at their legs and think, nope, not taking advice from you. I'll take advice from this guy who's building squats. He said do squats. I'm going to do squats. Okay? There are all kind of people who will walk up and say, I don't get it. I don't understand it. But if you get involved in a gym, there's all kind of people going to walk up and give you unsolicited advice. Man, you ought to be doing this. Man, you ought to be doing that. Man, you ought to be doing the other. And I'm not rude. I say thank you, but I look and say, I don't want to look like that. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Once I went to Pennsylvania on a business trip. They had a Anytime Fitness up there. I go into that Anytime Fitness, not near as nice as ours. One in Hampton Cove, boy, it's awesome. But I went into this Anytime Fitness, and I'm doing tricep press downs. And they've got a little trainer in there, and he's a little banty rooster. And I'm doing my tricep push downs. And he came by and he said, you know, doing that with that bar right there is hitting that outer part, and you ought to really use a rope, and then you could get the whole tricep and blah, blah, blah. And then he walked on with his person he was training, and I just kept doing what I was doing. In a little bit, he came back by, and he stopped, and he said, you know, there have studies been done that prove what I'm telling you is true. And while he's talking, I'm eyeballing his arms. They're this big. I'm not being rude, but his arms were this big. And he's telling me how to work my arms. And I'm in the middle of a set. I didn't ask for his advice. So I said, it's the outer part I'm trying to work. Thank you very much. Well, okay then, he said, and stomped off. Here's the point. If you try to better yourself, there are going to be all kind of people offering you advice. Make sure they're people you need to be taking advice from. Yeah. Listen to people who can help you reach your goals, not to people who just love to talk. In conclusion, Yahweh wants to push us forward. We have to position ourselves to be pushed forward. We have to change the way we think, the way we talk, the way we act. We have to learn new skills. We have to adopt new disciplines. We have to use consistent change in order to change. We have to listen to those who have already accomplished what we want to accomplish. And we have to pray every day. Every day we have to pray with enthusiasm. We have to open our eyes and get up with enthusiasm, believing that when we pray, it is heard and power is released. We have to get up every day with enthusiasm and say, Yahweh, bless me indeed. Bless me with gold. Bless me with silver. Bless me with great relationships. Bless me with multiple sources of income. Bless me with a business that's successful. Bless me with favor. Bless me indeed. Enlarge my coast. Enlarge my influence. Enlarge my real estate possessions. Enlarge my abilities to talk. Enlarge my abilities to hear you and to be able to speak that to others. Enlarge my ability to sail. Enlarge my coast. Let your hand be with me. Empower me. Lift me up. Hold me up. Push me forward. Let your hand be with me, Father. And keep me, Father. Keep me from lack and want and debt and distress. Keep me from sickness and disease, that those things might not be a grief to me. And thank you for granting to me my request. When we start doing that every day, there's nothing that can stop us from going forward. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. As His name is put upon you, so shall He Himself bless you.